We're excited about the fact that Virginians tomorrow will make clear that we want a governor who's focused on lowering costs, strengthening our communities, strengthening our public schools.
In these elections, maybe after tomorrow they'll come to their common senses again and do the right thing. We certainly pray that is true.
This is Today as It Happened. Good Monday evening to you. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your chronological look at the biggest events and stories of the day. From confusion surrounding food stamp benefits as the government shutdown enters its second month, to a look at the New York City mayoral race on the eve of Election Day. Let's jump right in. His first 60 Minutes interview on CBS since 2020, President Trump fielded questions on topics from tariffs to immigration to the government shutdown. President Trump stood by his position that the shutdown needs to end before any discussion on health care or immigration. The president said he doesn't think the methods used by ICE have gone too far. Trump also addressed the upcoming Supreme Court's oral arguments on whether his tariff policy is legal. He said if the high court rules against him, it would damage the country immeasurably. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visited the demilitarized zone and met with South Korea's defense minister on Monday as he began a two-day visit to South Korea for security talks. This trip comes as North Korea has ignored calls for dialogue while accelerating the expansion of its nuclear weapons and missile programs. Hegseth will attend the Allies' annual defense talks in Seoul on Tuesday, which are expected to cover key alliance issues, including South Korea's defense spending commitments. British police have charged a 32-year-old man with attempted murder over a mass stabbing attack on a train traveling from northern England to London on Saturday evening. Anthony Williams faces 10 counts of attempted murder and 1 count of actual bodily harm over Saturday's attack that wounded 11 people. Police say they're not treating the stabbings as an act of terror and are not looking for other suspects. Williams, who's a British citizen from Peterborough, is due to appear in court later today. A second man initially arrested was released without charge Sunday after police determined he was not involved. And from the NFL, plenty of highlights from Sunday's action, but this is the one that really stands out. It's a record setter. Check it out. Jacksonville Jaguars kicker Cam Little with a big play, record 68-yard field goal against the Las Vegas Raiders. Little's kick surpassed the former record of 66 yards set by Baltimore Ravens kicker Justin Tucker in 2021. And the Jags did go on to win the game over the Raiders 30-29. Healthcare is one of the most important issues for Americans, and for many, it's getting more expensive. Business and tech correspondent Maura Barrett joins us now. And Maura, what is behind this price hike that everybody seems to be noticing?
You're noticing it whether you're purchasing insurance through the marketplace or getting coverage through your employer. The price that everyone's paying for these premiums every month is going up going into next year. And so policy analysts specifically are looking at inflation, higher prescription costs, and more frequent use of care.
Whether you're on public or private insurance, you should be padding your budget line for premium costs going into 2026.
Anytime things like health insurance increase, it makes you uncomfortable.
Affordable Care Act plans, which enrolled a record 24 million people this year, will see an average 26% increase next year, with some states seeing astronomical increases if the enhanced premium tax credits expire. Meanwhile, costs for employer-sponsored plans are expected to surge nearly 10%, the largest increase in 15 years.
Jaw hit the floor. Going up to paying almost $1,200 a month it's going to be very, very difficult.
This comes as employees are battling inflation and stagnant wage growth.
The cost of their premiums is growing faster than their wages are growing, then it's just eating up a higher percentage of the amount of money that they take home.
Employers, they want to provide robust coverage, but they can't. It's becoming a barrier for them financially.
Noel Cruz consults on benefit packages for employers who typically cover a large portion of premiums.
It's a balance between salary and it's a balance between what we can pay for on the benefit side.
Health policy experts recommend you arm yourself with information when comparing plans to best understand your coverage and provider options.
I think it's definitely worth looking at your estimated health expenses and your family's needs to determine which is going to be the best option for you financially.
And so there's this understandable concern about people who need coverage being priced out, especially because there's this possibility of younger people opting out of the Obamacare or ACA markets. And health policy experts note that there's this risk when anyone goes uninsured, but ultimately insurance markets rely on this wide variety of people pooling payments in. So whether you're young or old, healthy or sick, everyone ultimately pays in to then, so that we all then tap into the insurance coverage when we need it, Holly.
And Maura, so if employers are looking for, say, a balance in their benefits packages, what elements could potentially be compromised?
Compromise is the key word here because employers are really looking to make sure that they're not passing too much on to employees when it comes to paying for premiums, and they want to keep those co-pays and deductibles about the same cost. And so where employers are looking at cutting some of those costs, they're looking at narrowing networks or narrowing the amount of providers that are available. So your primary care doctor might not be on that list anymore, so that's something to look at. Employers are also embracing coverage for more telemedicine options, so you can attend your therapy sessions or even physical therapy sessions via telehealth, because that can be cheaper on the employer side. And so again, it's really about finding that balance so that people still get good coverage, but maybe in different ways than they're used to, Holly.
Such important information. Thank you for bringing that to us, Maura Barrett. We appreciate it. And in other headlines today, courts in 2 states will hear arguments on the legality of National Guard deployments in Memphis and Washington, D.C. Democratic officials in Tennessee say Republican Governor Bill Lee cannot deploy the Guard for civil unrest without legislative action. And in West Virginia, a civic group is challenging Governor Patrick Morrisey's deployment of 300 Guard members to the nation's capital. Meanwhile, a federal judge in Oregon Sunday barred President Trump's administration from deploying the National Guard to Portland until at least Friday. Judge Karen Immergat said she found no credible evidence that protests in the city grew out of control before the president federalized those troops earlier this fall. The city and the state sued in September to block that deployment. 2 men are facing terrorism charges after the FBI says they plotted to attack LGBTQ+ bars in the Detroit area. Federal authorities say both men were inspired by ISIS and had scouted targets in Ferndale. The FBI says the men referred to pumpkins in conversations, which was a code for a Halloween attack. Investigators say a minor was also involved in those discussions. Both men appear in court this afternoon for their initial appearance. Coming up on Today As It Happened, the federal government shutdown has entered its 2nd month. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull has updates from the White House as critical food stamp benefits hang in the balance. Stay with us for her reporting after the break. Welcome back to Today As It Happened. Let's check back in on our daily briefing of today's top stories.
Today is the day that 42 million Americans could learn whether the food stamp check is in the mail or posted on their EBT card, and this is 0 hour for that to happen. 2 federal judges ruling Friday that the Trump administration has the money and should use that money to make sure people in this country don't go hungry. Let's go live to the White House now. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is on the North Lawn. And Haley, I understand we now know exactly how the administration plans to respond.
Yeah, Dell, that is exactly right. The administration telling the courts that it will partially fund SNAP with its remaining contingency funds this month as millions of Americans are facing uncertainty over their food benefits. Now, this follows a judge's ruling out of Rhode Island and Massachusetts in cases brought by both states and nonprofits, ordering the government to keep the SNAP program running. Previously, the USDA did not think it had the mechanisms to tap into contingency funds, but in a filing today announced it will, quote, expend the full amount of SNAP contingency funds and would not utilize child nutrition funds to provide full benefits. The government explained to the courts there will be about $4.65 billion in contingency funds for November that will cover half the month. The official overseeing the program writing to the courts, quote, "This means that no funds will remain for new SNAP applicants certified in November, disaster assistance, or as a cushion against the potential catastrophic consequences of shutting down SNAP entirely." The official also explained the government's decision and not using child nutrition program funds, stating that, quote, "Using billions of dollars from child nutrition for SNAP would leave an unprecedented gap in child nutrition funding that Congress has never had to fill with annual appropriations, and USDA cannot predict what Congress will do under these circumstances." Now, ahead of this ruling, Dell, this was a major question that the White House faced, and President Trump warned ahead of the ruling that funding could still be delayed as he called on lawyers to figure out how to legally fund the program. President Trump stating this when pressed over the weekend.
Well, all we have to do is open up the country. You know, we voted 14 times to open the country. We have voted 14 times to open the country, and they vote to keep it closed. All they have to do is vote to open the country, and we only need 5 Democrats. They have a lot of Democrats. We only need 5. But the Republicans have voted 14 times to open the country. Well, it's a much easier situation than that. If they vote to open the country and it's opened up immediately, we don't even have to think about that.
And this all comes as neither party has shown significant signs of budging in their conditions to open the government, and as President Trump is now doubling down on his call for a filibuster, writing on Truth Social, quote, "Terminate the filibuster, not just for the shutdown, but for everything else," a proposal that Republican leadership has not signed on to, Dell.
Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Beauforce live on the North Lawn. Haley, as always, we thank you very much.
We'll be right back to continue our look at today's top stories. You're watching Today As It Happened, Scripps News rundown of the biggest events and stories of the day. So let's jump right in.
President Trump threatening military action now against Nigeria. He says Christians in that West African country are being persecuted. Trump warning U.S. aid will stop and the U.S. may go into the country, in his words, guns a-blazing, to wipe out what he is calling Islamic terrorists. Nigeria's president is pushing back. He says the president's words don't reflect reality. He says Nigeria has constitutional guarantees to protect people of all faiths. A listeria outbreak linked to prepared pasta meals has grown now to 27 cases in 18 states. The CDC reporting that 25 people have been sent to the hospital. 6 of them are now dead. Recalled products include Sprouts Farmers Market smoked mozzarella pasta salad and Scott & John's shrimp scampi bowls. The bacteria is especially dangerous for pregnant women, people over the age of 65, and those with weak immune systems. Health officials say do not eat those recalled foods and clean your refrigerator thoroughly if you have them. It is a party in Los Angeles. Hundreds of thousands celebrating their World Series winning Dodgers, the team winning the title after being behind at the top of the 9th in Game 7. A homer in the 11th got them their 9th World Series championship, and as you can see, they know how to celebrate in the City of Angels. This weekend was the worst when it comes to air traffic controllers. The FAA reporting air traffic controllers had to alter their operations to keep the planes flying and to accommodate the staffing shortages. There were close to 100 staffing triggers from Friday morning till Sunday night. Now, those call-outs were really bad on Halloween. Airports in the 30 largest hubs in the country feeling the strain. Air traffic controllers are considered essential and have been told to work without pay during the stalemate. Now, 42 million people who rely on SNAP to eat and funding for their food stamps saw their benefits run out on Saturday. This was Bethesda, Maryland. Long lines just for food. So What Else is a nonprofit in Bethesda. It says it handed out food to more than 550 federal workers on Sunday. In Austell, Georgia, Must Ministries handing out food to another 1,000 people. The Trump administration today saying it will partially fund SNAP after 2 federal judges ordered the Agricultural Department to do so. telling it to tap into the $5 billion SNAP Emergency Contingency Fund, which it had said that it would not do. In court today, the Trump administration now says it will use about $4.65 billion of that money to partially pay this month's benefit. But it says it could take weeks or even months to load people's EBT cards. Sky Perryman is the president and CEO of the nonpartisan group Democracy Forward. They're part of the coalition that sued to get that funding restored for SNAP. Sky, is your group taking a victory lap, or is this just the first battle in what you perceive to be a longer war?
Well, look, I think it's very positive that the court has been clear that the administration had absolutely no legal basis to withhold the contingency funds for SNAP beneficiaries. And so we're very pleased about that and about the fact that people will be able to get those partial benefits. But we are looking at what the administration filed in court today. It's essentially doubling down, saying that even though the court has been clear that it can fully fund these payments, there's no barrier to what the administration is doing. It is going to take a step to try to deprive 42 million people of the full assistance that they need. We are looking at that filing, considering a range of legal options, and our commitment to people and communities across this nation is you're going to continue to see us pushing in court as we can to ensure that the law is followed and that people get the full benefits that Congress has made clear they need.
Sky, if you will, weigh in on the optics of the last 72 hours. Your group was in court fighting to make sure some 42 million Americans don't go hungry. The president was at Mar-a-Lago throwing a Gatsby-themed party, a great Gatsby-themed party, complete with dancers and champagne flowing. Your thoughts on the optics of what we saw over the past 72 hours in this nation?
It's just a callous disregard for people and communities in this country. People that rely on SNAP are working people. Many people are working people. They are veterans. They're children in some instances, senior citizens in other instances. And this is an administration that's showing a complete disregard for people. The other optics that are just unbelievable is that the administration seems to find money during the shutdown for things that it's prioritizing. It's bulldozing the East Wing of the White House. It's continuing to conduct ICE raids that are violating people's constitutional rights, that are requiring court action. But then when it comes to essential nutritional assistance that Americans need, that was specifically set up by Congress to make sure that people could get this assistance, even during a shutdown, the administration turns a blind eye, or even worse, at times doesn't turn a blind eye, but actually doubles down and taunts people in this country that rely on SNAP, saying they're not going to get their benefits.
I'm curious, what happens when the Agriculture Department runs out of money? It says it has money that may fund SNAP for roughly the half of the month of November. What happens if it runs out of money and the government shutdown continues?
So what documents in the court filings are showing is that there is money at the Department of Agriculture. It's not just that contingency fund. There are other pockets of money. The court has been clear that the administration can use those pockets of money in order to fully fund SNAP. The administration's doubling down and not seeking to do so. And I think you're going to see us in court, really exploring our legal options about how we can make sure that people's full benefits are paid.
Sky, Democrats are blaming Republicans. Republicans are blaming Democrats. Who do the people you represent blame?
The people that we represent are really just concerned about the people, but they do blame this administration. I mean, it is this administration that is the administration, the White House, that are depriving people of their benefits. The courts have been clear. There's no legal basis to say that the administration can't fund these benefits. And in fact, they were breaking the law when they weren't funding them out of the contingency fund. And so that blame is squarely on the president. And then, of course, his allies in Congress who continue to turn a blind eye to what people in this country are experiencing.
Final question before I let you go. Would you speak to a perception out there that the people who are getting these benefits, getting SNAP, are people who are sitting around and could be working?
Yeah, it's just such a wrong perception. The SNAP program, there are so many people. There's requirements actually that able-bodied adults be able, be working, be trying to get a job. We see a number of workers that rely on SNAP because wages are so low and unfair in many areas. We have clients that are in this case that work hard, but nevertheless need SNAP benefits in order to fully provide for their family. So you also have kids and veterans and senior citizens and people who live in areas where there are not enough good jobs that also rely on this essential benefits program. So this is really something that needs to be above politics. We need the administration to follow the law to fund these essential benefits, as the courts have said that they must, with respect to the contingency fund, and that they should. And that's what we're going to be working for every day.
Skye Perryman is the president and CEO of Democracy Forward. Skye, thanks for being with us. The First Lady of the Grateful Dead, Donna Jean Godchaux McKay, has died. The soulful mezzo-soprano singer was 78. A spokesman saying she succumbed to cancer and passed away Sunday in Nashville. You may not know her name, but you probably know her voice. She is featured in mega hits like Elvis Presley's Suspicious Mind and When a Man Loves a Woman by Percy Sledge. She and the Grateful Dead were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame back in 1994.
Coming up on Today As It Happened, it's Election Day Eve, and our politics team has you covered for all the biggest races on the ballot Tuesday, from the mayoral race in New York City to the governor's races in Virginia and New Jersey.
I think a big portion of this election has to do with Donald Trump. I think the fact that Donald Trump's policies are so destructive of social norms and everything going on, and the way he has disregarded our legal system and our laws.
He has caused so much division in this country.
Stay with us for our pre-election analysis straight ahead. We're glad you're back with Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer, here with your daily rundown of today's top stories.
If the polls are correct, the Big Apple will elect a Democrat who describes himself as a socialist. Zoran Mondani is running against former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo and Curtis Sliwa, a Republican who hails from the Guardian Angels. Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller is live in New York City. Alex, New York State Assembly member Zoran Mondani is headed for a victory Tuesday to become New York City's next mayor. What are the polls saying, and what are the early votes saying?
Well, Del, the early polling and the turnout has really been something that New York City was not expecting. Now, the polling shows that Zoran Mamdani is poised to become New York City's next mayor. The 31-year-old is leading former Governor Andrew Cuomo by double digits in nearly every single poll. And Republican Curtis Sliwa, he is not dropping out, he says, even though he is in a distant third place.
Zoran Mamdani's opponents have railed on his lack of experience, but his campaign tactics have likely been influenced by his youth.
Hello, my friends. People say we got this. It's over. Cuomo is cooked.
He's turned his issues from free buses to affordable housing into viral posts delivered in an informal, chatty style.
That was our focus.
He's all over social media, at times prioritizing podcasts over traditional media.
And I just wanted you to elaborate a bit more.
Even recently holding an influencer-only news conference.
So you've got to do all the above. You got to, court the traditional media, which I think all the candidates are trying to do. But you got to figure out a formula to make sure that people who are among the new media watchers or engagers get their news sources.
The strategy propelled him from being an unknown entity to a national name.
I think there are Trump parallels when it comes to messaging, when it comes to how to excite voters.
Nick E. Smith has worked in the halls Mamdani could soon oversee. He says Mamdani's social success has pushed mainstream Democrats into a corner, throwing their support behind him after initially voicing concerns.
The Democratic Party has lost the White House. They've lost the Senate. They've lost the House. And that's because the Republican Party has been brilliant at messaging, if not policy, for their base. The Democratic Party has to catch up.
Viral attacks on Mamdani like this one, accusing him of anti-police and anti-Semitic remarks, have made a much smaller impact, likely because of the fast-paced social environment.
You wake up and you turn on your phone and you see, some attack ad or some attack piece or attack press comes from a candidate. So voters are more aware of both the, let's say, assets and the liabilities of their candidates.
With each election cycle, the voter becomes more accessible and persuadable through their phones.
And Del, Democrats surely were paying attention this weekend when Zohran Mamdani was campaigning late night across clubs all over New York City. He was there over the weekend. He was at the marathon yesterday. So they are paying attention. And it's been interesting to watch how some of these major Democratic leaders have thrown their support behind him, despite the fact that they did not in the beginning. They were frankly upset that he did not disavow things like the phrase globalized intifada, that he made certain commentary, that he was hanging out with certain podcasters, and yet they are now supporting him. Leaders like you saw Hakeem Jeffries, like Governor Kathy Hochul, who endorsed Mamdani early. She has not gotten that same endorsement. And I asked Nick Smith about this. I said, what's the likelihood that he is going to have success should he become mayor? Are his policies going to be actually put into place? Because you've got the legislature in New York, you've got a more moderate governor. And he said, while there is the potential that Mamdani could run into roadblocks with his policy, there's also the reverse. They are seeing how popular he is on social media. They've got their own elections that they are staring down. So they very well may also be paying attention to his success, though I should note over the weekends, Jeffries did say that he doesn't believe Mamdani is the future of the Democratic Party.
Interesting, though, that we could be looking at the first TikTok mayor of New York City. Has all that energy on social media translated, though, into votes, people actually casting their ballots?
You know, it's hard to say whether that's the reason, but we are seeing record turnout here in New York City. Early voting has ended, but from that entire week of early voting, we saw 700,000 New Yorkers cast their ballot. That is an incredibly high number. Now, there are 5.3 million registered voters in New York, but we never expect to see that high of a number. When you just compare it with the last election in 2021 with Eric Adams and Curtis Sliwa, this number has already eclipsed the total vote. 65% of the vote that was just cast in early voting compared to the total vote that we saw in 2021. We could see something like 2 million ballots cast here in New York for the mayor. We have not seen those numbers since 1989, 1993, nearly 35 years since those elections. And those elections included having Rudy Giuliani on the ballot.
Scripps News national correspondent Alex Miller for us live in New York. Alex, as always, thank you. Voters in lots of states across the country are going to the polls tomorrow. These off-year elections are often a bellwether for what we could see in the midterms. Turnout is usually low, but not this year. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen is across the river from us in Alexandria, Virginia. And Stephanie, as I said, turnout is usually low, but not this year. What key races are we watching?
Hey, Del, good afternoon. Well, it's voters in more than a dozen states, including here in Virginia, of course, that are going to the polls tomorrow, really amid unprecedented times. We are in what will ultimately become the longest government shutdown ever, and that shutdown is really increasing economic concerns for Americans across the country. Americans in more than a dozen states are heading to the polls Tuesday.
I think that this is an important election. There's a lot of things that people care about.
In New Jersey and Virginia, voters will decide on a new governor. New York City's mayoral race is being closely watched. Californians are voting on a redistricting measure, and voters in several other states will cast ballots on local leaders or statewide measures. Polls show the Democratic candidates are favored to win the governor's races in New Jersey and Virginia.
Especially if these races go the way that we expect. I think national Democrats are really going to want to point toward people like Mikey Sherrill and Abigail Spanberger as sort of the future of the Democratic Party.
Tuesday's elections are taking place amid the ongoing federal government shutdown, which is causing growing concerns for many Americans. 86% say they're concerned about the shutdown's impact on the economy, according to a new CBS News poll. And more than 7 in 10 say Congress is not working to end the shutdown. Affordability has taken center stage in both the gubernatorial races.
When I go to the grocery store, everything is high.
I just don't know how ordinary folks that you see here are making ends meet.
And the economy and cost of living is the top issue for nearly half of voters.
The economy is a big thing in this community too. You know, you see people that are barely making it paycheck to paycheck, and the problem is that the cost of living is just going out of this roof.
Well, Del, the government shutdown will be in day 35 when all of these voters across the country go to the polls tomorrow. And as we've been talking about for days, there are growing impacts for Americans across the country. SNAP funding lapsing over the weekend. Some Head Start schools starting to close their doors this week for lack of funding. And the longer this government shutdown continues, more and more Americans are going to feel the impact as every day passes by.
Stephanie, people saying they haven't seen food lines like this since the days of COVID. Millions of Americans, though, as we have been reporting, got that bit of good news today. Can you tell us more about what the Trump administration said in its court filings?
So it was a Rhode Island federal judge that basically ordered the Trump administration to use some contingency funding and to fund SNAP for the month of November. So the Trump administration in a court filing today saying that they are going to use, it's about $4.5 billion to partially cover SNAP funding for the month of November. SNAP for the entire month for all of the families enrolled would be $8 billion. So they're not going to be able to fully fund it. What is unclear is exactly when those partial funds are going to become available for Americans across the country. There are some states that had stepped up and states were funding SNAP in the lapse from the federal funding. And the government, the Trump administration, saying in their court filing, because of how some state systems work, they're not designed to deliver partial benefits, that it could be weeks or even months in some cases before the families that need that partial funding for the month of November could be waiting weeks or months until they actually get it in their accounts, Del, which is certainly not going to help in the next few days.
When we talk weeks or months in November, we're talking Christmas and Thanksgiving. Scripps News Washington correspondent Stephanie Liebergen. Stephanie, as always, we thank you very much. Democrats and Republicans setting their sights on New Jersey. Republicans believe their candidate has the best chance to beat the odds and upset the Democrat who holds the lead in the polls. Democrats say holding on to the governor's mansion would be history in its own right. Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed is standing by live. Exit 100, I believe, Avon by the Sea in New Jersey. Nate, is an upset in the making, or is history about to be made?
Well, Del, we're about to head to a Jack Ciattarelli event. He's run for governor now 3 consecutive cycles. Last time he was the Republican nominee as well, facing off against Governor Phil Murphy. He's a term-limited Democrat, but no 3 consecutive terms have been held by a Democratic governor since 1961. So Democrats are looking to break the mold here. What's interesting about this race, it's an off-year election, of course. We're just 1 year out from the presidential election in 2024. Already we're seeing, high early vote numbers, votes that typically benefits Democrats, especially because this is a state where there are far more registered Democrats than Republicans. But 2024 was kind of an interesting election. Republicans lost in this state. Vice President Kamala Harris won the state, but only by a couple of points. A lot of areas, especially Hispanic-heavy areas like Passaic County, where we'll be tomorrow, shifted to the Republicans. Passaic County won by President Donald Trump in the 2024 election. So Democrats looking to make up that ground that has been filled in by the Republicans. We're headed to that Ciattarelli event soon. But what's interesting in this race is the outsized appearance and presence of a man who has not been on the ground himself, President Donald Trump. We spoke with supporters of Mikey Sherrill, the Democratic candidate for governor, along with Congresswoman Sherrill herself. The supporters telling us that President Trump, a key factor in the race this year. How much is this election about Donald Trump, about his policies nationally?
I think a big portion of this election has to do with Donald Trump. I think the fact that Donald Trump's policies are so destructive of social norms and everything going on, and the way he has disregarded our legal system and our laws.
He has caused so much division in this country.
Donald Trump has influence, and he makes division, and he works on that, and he wants to make every state a red state. He wants to control.
There's already been a fair amount of early voting in the state. The polls open in under 24 hours. We'll be watching this race very closely. Again, Mikey Sherrill has been up in almost every single poll with the exception of a handful which have shown the race tied in the last month. At the same time, a lot of questions about whether Democrats are able to pick up the counties they typically pick up. Again, as is the issue with every single off-year race. This one, of course, just a year after the 2024 election. The question of turnout, whether voters will turn out to the polls, whether they're motivated to vote. Certainly Democrats betting big on President Donald Trump. I spoke with the executive director earlier today of the New Jersey GOP. She told me this race is not about Donald Trump. Rather, it's about affordability for New Jerseyans, something that both campaigns are talking about heavily.
Scripps News congressional correspondent Nathaniel Reed, Avon by the Sea, and yes, that is an actual live shot. He is not standing in front of a chroma key. It is that nice.
Pretty nice. Jersey Shore,
like
why
it, to tell you
not?
the truth, I'm jealous. I got the studio, so enjoy. Nate Reed for us in New Jersey.
I'll bring you some sand.
Coming up on Today as It Happened.
This is about fixing the state of New Jersey. And so you don't have to worry about me when you elect me going down there and losing my focus. I don't want to be congressman. I don't want to be senator. I don't want to be president. I don't want to write a book. I just want to right the ship.
It has been wonderful to have the opportunity to go across the state, to hear from thousands and thousands of New Jerseyans about the hopes that they have for their children, which mirror my hopes for my 4 kids and Dale's hope for his daughter.
There are a lot of differences between me and my opponent. Here's one for right here and right now. I know where the hell Totowa is.
Welcome back to Today as It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. Okay, let's jump right back into our rundown of the top stories of the day.
These 2 races, Virginia, New Jersey, almost said North Carolina. What are you going to be watching?
Well, look, of course, these are the only, as you said, barometer to where the electorate is going into the midterms next year. So people like me are going to dissect these results and try to read all the tea leaves they can about where the electorate is. Now, 1 year since that 2024 election, not always a great barometer, I should add. They're not really have that predictive power that you often hear pundits talk about. But I do think, of course, you're watching the margins here in addition to who wins and who loses. Polling pretty solid for Democrats, specifically where we are near Virginia. I think New Jersey shaping up to be a little bit more competitive. Those odd year polling, though, these off year elections, always kind of throw them out in terms of what to expect because we've seen a number of surprises. The electorate is just really, really unpredictable. We've heard our reporters on the ground, both Stephanie in Virginia and Nate Reed, who's in New Jersey, talk about high turnout in some of those early voting totals. That's generally good news for Democrats. But we're really looking for where are things, not just today, but where are things heading? And so what are the trends that we saw in 2024 and have those continued? I think in New Jersey, it's going to be really interesting to watch some of those Hispanic communities, specifically where Donald Trump did better than Republicans in the past. Remember, he won the state by just 6 points. It was closer than it had been in nearly decades. And so does his momentum continue with some of those groups? Because we talk about polls all the time, and some of those polls show that specifically young Hispanic voters have begun to sour on Donald Trump, but now we're actually going to have some hard data to back up what some of these surveys have said. Here near us in Virginia, I think it'll be so fascinating to see what Stephanie was just talking about, the impact, of course, of the shutdown and of just sort of the downsizing of the federal government. Of course, you can't really translate that to the broader electorate just because Virginia has such a higher percentage of federal workers, but the overall mood of voters when it comes to this president and what he has or has not done on the economy is going to be key. Hopefully we'll get some exit polls and some ideas why people are making the decisions that they are in these 2 states.
I'm curious to get your take on this. We're talking about the possibility that New York could elect its first Muslim mayor.
Yeah.
I mean, we're also talking about the fact that we could have 2 women become governors of 2 major states.
Yeah.
I'm hearing Hillary Clinton. I'm hearing Kamala Harris. Is the ceiling now the White House and not the governor's mansion?
In terms, yeah, we are going to have some history made, especially, Virginia, regardless of whether it's Abigail Spanberger, the Democrat, Winsome Earl Sears, the Republican, it'll be the state's first female governor. And you mentioned the transitional and really historic candidacy of Zohran Mamdani in New York City. I do think that what we are going to see really is between, it's interesting, Del, you and I were talking about how the backgrounds of both Spanberger and Mikey Sherrill are very similar. They're both Democrats or members of the House. Both have national security related backgrounds, military backgrounds. But Mamdani in New York is someone very different. You mentioned his religious background, and he has been somebody who has already become a darling for not particularly flattering reasons of conservative media. And there was even an interview with Spanberger a couple days ago where she was kind of talking about his candidacy and sort of the perils that come with not just his, but specifically this strain of democratic socialism. What he's been talking about on the campaign trail, what he has been promising on the campaign trail, and how some of these more moderate Democrats who are really, it'll be interesting to see how Spanberger does in some of the rural areas of Virginia tomorrow night, how that compares to sort of this other strain, this Bernie Sanders, AOC, who we've seen come out on the campaign trail in New York.
Packing thousands of people, by the way. Scripps News Political Director Andrew Rafferty wraps up all these things.
Up next on Today As It Happened.
When you look around your kitchen, you might see dollar signs. Food is getting more expensive, and so is the cost to keep your appliances running. I'm Erin Miller in Norfolk with 3 ways you can lower your bill.
Welcome back to Today As It Happened. This is Scripps News Debrief of our top stories of the day. So let's jump right back in.
The penny shortage affecting another business. McDonald's is now rounding its cash transactions to the nearest nickel. The Mint stopped producing pennies earlier this year, and now when customers pay cash without the exact change, their totals are rounded up or down by as much as 2 cents. A meal then costing $12.06 would be rounded down to $12.05. The rounding only affects cash payments, by the way, not credit card or apps. Other retailers like Kroger's and Love's and Home Depot also dealing with a shortage of pennies.
When you look around your kitchen, you might see dollar signs. Food is getting more expensive, and so is the cost to keep your appliances running. I'm Erin Miller in Norfolk with 3 ways you can lower your bill. Starting with unplugging the microwave, the toaster, even your coffee maker. If you're not using it, it's quietly draining electricity all day, every day.
It's called phantom load. Some people call this vampire energy. We find that customers are really surprised at how much they can save when they start to unplug devices that are not in use.
Sharice Newsome with Dominion Energy tells me that goes for anything in your house. Your treadmill, your kids' video games, or your computer. Next, use power strips with switches.
Smart power strips will automatically cut the flow of electricity to devices when they are not in use.
And finally, consider energy-efficient appliances. By design, they'll have lower standby power. If you're a federal worker who needs help with their bill, Dominion says their support.
We have an energy share program that provides up to $600 of bill payment assistance. It's not an income-based program. It's based upon your financial need.
Dominion says if you make small changes, you could save between 5 and 10% on your bill or $100 a year. Erin Miller, Scripps News Group.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening for Today As It Happened. I'm Holly Furfer. We hope you have a great Monday night.